Okay, this is Block 8, Pax Americana, Section 2, the beginning of the Cold War, with the section starting the Bretton Woods Conference. The Bretton Woods Conference is one of those things that no one's ever heard of, but has played a major role in the post-war world. It was largely believed among most people that the instability, the economic instability of the 1930s helped lead to the rise of the dictators. That if things had been, economically good in Italy, Japan, and Germany, then Italy, Japan, and Germany would not have fallen into the clutches of these dictators using economic hurt to kind of convince people to go along with what they wanted. Therefore, in the world after the war, and even while the war was still being fought, there was an effort to establish certain international economic bodies that would kind of keep world trade flowing and offer protection for national economies, that all the countries of the world would work together to kind of set up a couple systems and a couple standards by which international economics could take place, and then also a method by which individual countries could be helped out and protected from the vagrancies of the market. What came out of this, they had a big meeting at a place called Bretton Woods. It's a nice little resort in New Hampshire. And at this Bretton Woods conference, all of the finance ministers and important economic people got together and produced two bodies in what became known as GATT. That the conference produced GATT, G-A-T-T. And GATT was an acronym that stood for General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. And the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade was very simple. It was generally agreed that tariffs would be kept as low as possible in order to encourage international trade. That the entire world, with very few exceptions, was going to engage in this free trade system without much in the way of tariffs. That's a great victory for the free trade nations like Great Britain and the United States. So it takes this, GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, and then the Bretton Woods Conference kind of gives birth to two very important organizations. One is known as the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. The IMF seeks to encourage world trade by regulating international exchange rates. What that means is, before GATT, the British pound and the French franc and the American dollar all floated against each other willy-nilly. IMF seeks to regulate that to an extent and have businessmen and corporations and individuals know that in general this is how much a pound is worth, this is how much a franc is worth, this is how much a yen is worth, this is how much a dollar is worth, this is how much a lira is worth, this is how much a peso is worth, a rial, a baht, etc., etc., etc. That although these currencies do float to a degree, their floating is regulated by this International Monetary Fund. What the IMF also will serve as is a lender of last resort. If a government is in danger of going bankrupt and it cannot raise any money privately, it can go to the IMF for a loan. And the idea is that will prevent these economic crashes and catastrophes that happened in the 1930s. So that's IMF, regulate exchange rates and a national lender of last resort. And the money would come from money put in by all the countries, that everyone involved in the Bretton Woods Agreement would put in a certain amount of money every year, and then that money could be sent out as emergency loans to any of the countries involved in the IMF. Bretton Woods also sets up the World Bank. The IMF is designed for kind of the advanced countries of the world. The World Bank is set up for the war-torn and undeveloped portions of the world. And its goal is to make loans to create economic activity in the war-torn nations, in the third world countries, in the underdeveloped parts of the world, by promoting large-scale projects, huge dams, massive agricultural experiments, loans to governments to provide these things. These are not small-scale things the World Bank does. The World Bank, if the government of Bangladesh wants to build a dam, it can get funding for that dam through the World Bank, which is funded largely, again, through the wealthier countries in the world, the United States, Britain especially. All of these things serve to try to prevent the economic instability of the 1930s from ever coming back. And by and large, GATT has been, as far as international bodies go, stunningly successful. The amount of world trade has gone up by thousands of percent since 1945. The IMF has regulated exchange rates successfully for the most part. Countries have gotten loans from the IMF when they had nowhere else to turn. The World Bank has funded major projects throughout the world in its 60-plus years of existence. The Bretton Woods Conference has to be seen as one of the foundations of the post-war world. And it was very successful in preventing the kind of economic calamity that defined the 1930s.